Welcome back to Looking at Lucasfilm with Brian Gaughan, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, Dave Filoni, and Jon Favreau, as well as the rest of the team at Lucasfilm, have dreamed up over the past 44 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and I am joined tonight by pop culture enthusiast Brian Gaughan, and he and I are recording this week's show on Sunday, June 23rd. Now, Brian will soon be sharing his thoughts on Star Wars Acolyte, the limited series that's been running over on Disney Plus, and he's also going to tell us what it was like to be at Disneyland on real Star Wars Day, not May the 4th. But again, all sorts of Lucasfilm-related news coming up. And speaking of news, want to remind you that the news portion of today's show is brought to you by TouringPlans.com. If you're headed down to Central Florida anytime soon to sample some of the theme parks that can be found around the city beautiful, well, TouringPlans.com can help save you time. More importantly, it can help save you money as you wander around Disney World and the Universal Orlando Resort. So please check them out at TouringPlans.com. Now, Brian, want to remind you, we are recording the show on Sunday, June 23rd, and as a Disney, history enthusiast, in addition to somebody who loves Star Wars, wanted to share with you that it was 71 years ago today, on June 23rd, 1953, that Walt Disney Productions set up the Buena Vista Film Distribution Company. And basically, Disney took control of its own destiny on that day. It was no longer beholden to RKO Pictures, which had distributed all of the studio's feature-length films that the company has made since December of 1937. And you, of course, know what came out on December of 1937.
Yes, a cartoon that was longer than 7 minutes.
There we go. Yes, it featured 7 little men. So, now, mind you, Walt did this because, well, he didn't always see eye to eye with the head of RKO Studios,
right?
Who was that?
RKO? John Hughes, Howard Hughes.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, John Hughes came later.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I have a wonder. Do you know why it was called Buena Vista Pictures?
Was it now? I've always heard it was because of the street.
Yep.
The
original studios was on Buena Vista Street.
Yep.
So that's why they got. What are we going to name it? And they look outside the window. Oh, let's call it Buena Vista Street.
There's a really rude joke there that has that same line, but I'm not. I can't tell it. It's a family podcast. Okay. Anyway, Howard. Now, interesting. Walt and Howard sometimes did not see eye to eye. Case in point, Seal Island, the very first true life adventure. Walt shows this film that had been shot up in Alaska, live action, to Howard, and he's like, I don't get it. You think people are actually going to pay money to watch a bunch of seals roll around in the surf? And so, no, we're not putting this out through RKO. So Walt decides to go around Howard. He, on his own dime, he arranges to have Seal Island shown in theaters in New York and L.A. in late 1948.
Now, did he four-wall it, or did he just distribute it into the theaters?
Well, the interesting thing is, I think what he was looking to do was to get it in front of the press.
Okay.
Because, all right, it got great reviews, and more importantly, it managed to take home the 1949 Oscar for Best Live Action Short Subject. And, okay, Howard at this point goes, all right, I was wrong about Seal Island. He apologizes to Walt. And RKO then goes on to release all of Disney's subsequent true life adventures. But the damage had been done to their relationship.
Were they all short movies, or did they put them all together and make a feature film out of them?
Well, we got the best of the Disney's True Life Adventures in the mid-'70s, where they effectively clipped a bunch of them together.
Okay, yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, but mostly these were 30-minute featurettes, which then Disney would sometimes pad out. I mean, they played in theaters into the mid 50s, and then, of course, got repurposed for the Disney television show.
Right.
But speaking of which, it was this interaction with RKO that got Walt thinking, all right, I need to be thinking about my future here. I need to be thinking about what would it be like to not have to deal with an RKO. So this is where, for example, Walt winds up signing that TV deal with ABC in March of 54, which then gives him the seed money he needs to start building Disneyland just 4 months later in July of that same year, 54. And speaking of Disneyland, did you see where Daisy Ridley, just in the past week, made a special trip down to Anaheim?
There's pictures of her, which is very cool because you see the character that plays Ray, and she's dressed up, and then you see Daisy, and Daisy is incognito. She's got a bucket hat on, she's got sunglasses, and she's got like a coat, and I'm going, must have been one of the cold days out here. But she it seems to have a really good conversation. I would have loved to heard that conversation. Did the characters stay in character like they're supposed to? Did she goes, oh yeah, I remember, or something?
Well, what's interesting is that Daisy on Instagram described this moment at Disneyland as being, well, surreal. And now, speaking of surreal, you had your own kind of surreal experience at the Happiest Place on Earth like last month on May 25th, real Star Wars Day. So let's start with the obvious, Brian. Why is that real Star Wars Day versus May the 4th?
Well, before the punny little thing started as May the 4th, there was a Star Wars Day, and it was a day that we, meaning all the people who have seen the Star Wars, and it actually tail end of the baby boomers, more into the, I don't even know what was after the baby boomers, Generation X. That was our movie, but that was the day that Star Wars, it was a Wednesday, because at that time they would release movies on Wednesday, and that was a Wednesday that it was released on. Now, I didn't see it on a Wednesday. I saw it on the next day. And unfortunately, I didn't get the little button that said, "May the Force be with you." My friends did, and they rubbed it in my face. So that's why I had to go the next day, hoping I would get one, but I didn't. But there's also a movie by Patrick Reed Johnson called 5/25/77. And it's how this movie basically changed his life and all the life of geeks, because even at that time, I went by myself because I couldn't get anybody to go with me. But that Friday, the news was putting all over that these people are waiting in line for hours to see this movie called Star Wars. And it was Memorial Day weekend. And everybody wanted to see it. I saw it on Saturday. I saw it twice on Friday or Sunday and once on Monday, because everybody wanted to see it and they didn't want to go alone. So I said, sure, I'll go see it with you. And that's why it's the true day. So I went to Disneyland hoping that maybe a couple of us would have the idea and go there and just, I don't know, I sit in a circle and sing Kumbaya. I don't know, just something that would remind us that this is the true day, that our life had changed. And there was nothing. There wasn't a T-shirt. I even asked somebody, "Do you know what this day was?" And one of the cast members, and they stayed in character. So it's like they go, "No, we don't." But there were a couple people online when I put this on Instagram to talk about it. One of my friends say you weren't the only one, and she forwarded a something that somebody put together to get it. But in 2 more years it's going to be the 50th anniversary.
Forgive me for putting this out there, but if we were actually going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the original release of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, wouldn't it stand to reason that the best place to do that wouldn't be inside of Disneyland, or at least out in Southern California? Wouldn't I mean, if I were the guy in charge of the what is it now? The TCL Chinese Theater, is that the name of it?
Yeah,
Uh,
that's where it just blew everybody away.
yeah, I mean, wouldn't it stand to reason that somebody there should be looking 2 years down the line and think, okay, I got to talk to the folks at Disney. Can we have A New Hope on that day in the TCL Chinese Theater and recreate the experience? I mean,
Oh,
you know what
better than that,
what?
the original print.
No,
The
they see.
original,
There we
not
go. There we go.
that would just show the original film. I mean, somebody's got to be listening to this.
Okay.
Just show the original version without the New Hope of Star Wars the way it was shown to everybody. Warts and all.
Okay, but again, I'm enough of a geek, and again, I went to movies in the same era that you did, so I want just a little bit more. I want the trailers. I want the let's all go to the lobby. I mean, I want the whole terrible 1970s film experience. You know, I mean, and Summer of '77. What else would they have been having a trailer for? Was that a Smokey and the Bandit year? Was that, you know? I mean,
It could have been, but they would have had it for Sorcerer.
Oh,
They would have had it for Roller Coaster.
okay.
They would have had it for Bridge Too Far.
I just saw that the other night. By
Isn't
the way,
that an amazing movie?
well, I just but the weird thing of it is that it is such an, you know, I mean, it's such an animal of that era. I mean,
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins, Sean Connery. I mean, everybody in it.
Robert Redford.
There we go. There we go. But
I mean, everybody's in it. Isn't Laurence Olivier in it too?
I think Laura.
And Tissue Mifune, isn't Mifune in it?
I don't know about that.
Because doesn't he play Yamamoto or something?
I think we talked about this. I don't really have control over the television in our house. I get it for the 20 minutes after Nancy has finished watching Hallmark movies and she gets ready to go to bed. So I get it for those 20 minutes before we go to bed. And so last night I found A Bridge Too Far on and watched 20 minutes. And it was just like, oh.
Okay, this is time we put a Fund Me thing and try to get you a new TV so you can hide in the basement or something.
No. I got things to do. I got to do podcasts. I got. Speaking of it, we got to get back to this podcast and back to Daisy Ridley, who, as you mentioned, had this fun encounter with the cast member. And again, to give you some idea, that Daisy's a class act. She went on Instagram and had high praise for the Disneyland cast member she interacted with as Ray. She also had made a point of mentioning the part Plaid, who was leading her and her group around the happiest place on earth. In fact, she included the till Phil Ander, the best Disney tour guide that there ever was. Now, mind you, she couldn't do the same thing with the cast member playing Ray because, well, those are the rules of the part. You are not the performer playing that character, but when you're walking around on stage, you are that character, which brings me back to what you said. Yes, I would have paid good money to hear Ray talking to Daisy Ridley. It just what would a Ray say to Daisy Ridley? So,
well, if you see the picture too, Ray is serious. She's just standing there, and you can know that she's got to be a fangirl, and she just wants a fangirl, and she can't. She's got to stay in character. And it just, and also Ridley said that was kind of weird that when she went into Rise of the Resistance, to see her hologram as the first thing that introduces you.
She
Could
did.
you imagine that meta thing just like going, oh my God, my brain is exploding.
All right. The only time in my lifetime I've ever had anything even close to that happen. Have I told you the story? I went to the Burbank Public Library because I was looking for info on the Disney MGM Studio Backlot project. Remember that we're going to build an attraction downtown that was sort of a riff on the Disney MGM Studios in Florida.
Yeah, it was going to be. It was basically going to be a mall.
Yeah, but it was kind of the best of Disney MGM married to Pleasure Island, and you're right, shops
And then it was going to have regular mall stores too.
It was,
and I know exactly where it is because I go to it's called the Media Center, the Burbank Media Center. Not a great mall,
okay,
but for a long time it was empty.
All right.
But yeah, that's where it was going. And continue your story. I'm sorry.
No. So anyway, I'm there dealing with the research assistant at the Burbank Public Library, and I'm asking about this project. And she's like, "Geez, I don't know. Hang on." And she goes in the back room and she's hammering on her computer for a while, and she print out some document, and she brings it to me and says, "I'm sorry, there isn't a whole lot out there, but I did find this." And she hands me a printout, and it's an article I wrote, and again, how many times in life do you get to do this? So I look at it and, oh God, no, not this moron. You can't believe anything this guy says. And she says, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Why would you say that?" "Well, he's me." And she says, "That's never happened to me before."
Funny.
It's, oh my God. So, well, anyway, getting back to, I mean, face it, when we're talking about Daisy Ridley, we are talking about the once and future Rey, because of course, Star Wars New Jedi Order, which is also evidently informally known as Episode 10, is bubbling along, and just recently, Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, the director of this project, was talking with Star Sirius XM 109 about the soon-to-shoot film, and she shared that yes, it picks up where the Star Wars saga left off. It's 15 years later. They are going to acknowledge the events that happened in Rise of Skywalker, which, again, remember, released to theaters December 2019. And I think, as you mentioned, it's Rey trying to set up a new training academy for would-be Jedi. And Sharmeen, talked about the challenges that lie ahead with New Jedi Order, that it's hard to create something that's going to dovetail into the events that we saw in the Disney-produced Star Wars trilogy, but at the same time, remembering that this is Rey's story, and it's important to give an actress like Daisy Ridley new challenges, new things to do with the story. So evidently, why Obaid-Chinoy has been developing the story, she's been talking with some Star Wars heavy hitters. I mean, we're talking George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, and Dave Filoni, with the ultimate goal here being to hit that sweet spot story-wise, something between the old and the new. And again, as Sharmeen told the folks at XM, we're trying to do justice to the story of Rey. I mean, honor the wonderful journey that she went on in episode 7, 8, and 9, while at the same time take this much beloved Star Wars character on a new adventure. Plus, introduce Star Wars fans to some new characters that the next generation of moviegoers will fall in love with. Now, achieving that sort of balance is tough. And Brian, you had some thoughts about this, right?
Yeah, I read something that what they did was, or what they're thinking of doing is maybe juxtapositioning it with when Luke went to build his Jedi temple, and because we saw the beginning of it in Mandalorian, and we saw basically the end of it in The Last Jedi. So I think they're going to, like, maybe a flashback, maybe relating to it in some way to see if she comes up with the same problems that he did, because maybe there was more to it than Kylo Ren being the bad guy and destroying everything. Maybe there was a build-up to that. Maybe there was an I don't know, it could be very Shakespearean, could be not King Lear, but Othello type of thing, that somebody is talking in Luke's ear. And also, we saw in The Last Jedi, wasn't there like a group of 5 people that were there at the destroying of it? There was like this group, and I forget what they called them, but I think that they had something to do with the destruction of his academy too. So yeah, that's what they're going to meet to. They're going to marry, but they also said it's going to be almost a standalone too.
Yeah.
That it's going to continue. Basically, the Skywalker saga is done, and now we're going to a next thing, which I think is great because especially, and we'll be talking about it, how the Acolyte is showing us not how it began, but how the schism began.
Interesting. Okay, now, worth noting again, we just talked about how Charmine talked with George and Dave and JJ and Kathleen. But it's also important to understand that behind the scenes, people don't always agree on what's the best way to go, especially when it comes to Star Wars. And I bring this up because Gary Kurtz, the producer of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, really disliked where George had decided to go with Return of the Jedi. So much so that Kurtz actually left the company rather than continue on as the producer of Episode 6. And had you heard what the breaking point was between George and Gary? Because I've come across this story about the Ewoks. Have you heard this?
Yeah, when George originally the Ewoks were supposed to go to the Wookiee planet.
That's
it was supposed to be a Wookiee thing, and I think that was okay with everybody. But then George got there and said, "No, we have to make these." I don't know. Maybe he looked over at his dog or something and said, "We have to make these cute." I don't know if George was thinking merchandising, but I don't really know. I haven't read why George went with the Ewoks.
Well,
but
no. I mean, you've basically got the story. In fact, as Gary told the Los Angeles Times, it's like, look, I could see where things were heading. That the toy business was starting to drive creative decisions at Lucasfilm, which was a shame. I mean, but the hard reality was that Lucasfilm made 3 times the amount of money off of the sales of Star Wars toys than it did off of the movies themselves. And I guess the part of the story that I always like to remind people about is, I mean, we talked about it on this podcast. Back in 1973, George Lucas is sitting in a room with, the executives of 20th Century Fox, hammering out his deal to direct the film that he's written, Star Wars. And he's okay. He doesn't want to raise. When it comes to his directing fee, he's perfectly happy to make $150,000, just like he did for directing American Graffiti for Universal. But he does want 2 new codicils placed in his contract. Codicil number 1 is he retains the rights to make any Star Wars sequels. But equally important, codicil number 2 is Lucas also retains any merchandising rights to A New Hope and its sequels. And I have to tell you, Brian, that the executives who were in the room at the time with George thought, as he's negotiating with Alan Ladd Jr., I mean, they thought he was an idiot. I mean, it's just like, really? That's what you want? But it's also important to remember that the stories from the actual set of A New Hope, when Carrie and Mark and Harrison were having trouble saying the dialogue that George had written, and George, we called them, it's a kid's film, like Disney. And think about it, what George could see here that no one else could see was, I mean, look, if you're following the Disney playbook, the love bug leads to Herbie Rides Again, which leads to Herbie goes to Monte Carlo, and then Herbie goes bananas. And more to the point, kids love to buy toys based on films that they've loved and seen.
Well, yeah, but if you think about it, Disney was possibly the only one who was doing merchandise like that. I'm looking back, and I can't think of anything pre-Star Wars that had any kind of merchandising.
No.
I mean, maybe Planet of the Apes.
But again, also that's Fox. But here's why the Fox executives thought George was an idiot, because they had just been through Dr. Dolittle. which, remember, Fox
Okay.
made because Mary Poppins had made so much money and it had so many toys, and they had made The Sound of Music, and the one thing when they were comparing Sound of Music to Mary Poppins is like, damn, we made all the money in the world off of movie tickets, but face it, nobody would. Yeah, they bought the album for A Sound of Music, but there were no toys, and so
Yeah, I would have liked to have my little Nazis just hanging around.
yes, you just have the action figure walk into the hall.
Yeah.
They're gone.
There they go.
Okay, well, anyway, so they had made toys. They had licensed out Dr. Dolittle, and of course that bombed and none of the toys sold. So anyway,
So they were just thinking it was a waste of time.
yeah, and
But I mean, and think of Jaws. I don't think there was anything
no.
that came out with Jaws except for maybe posters and
Yeah. Posters, soundtrack.
beach towels.
There we go. I mean, it just
Yeah, but no. I mean, I have a lot of Jaws figures now, but they did not come out until about 10, 15 years ago.
Yep. Yep.
So
Okay, now getting back to Lucas and Disney,
Right.
and I remember, George again has been talking lately, and we were just talking about Jedi new Jedi Order and the Disney produced trilogy, and George, there's no polite way of saying it. George wasn't necessarily happy with a lot of the story decisions that have been made with his characters. Again, but again, he sold the company off for $4.5 billion back in October of 2012, and he talked about this recently. He said, "Look, I'm the one who really knows what Star Wars was or is. I actually knew this world and there's a lot to it. I mean, the Force. No one understands the Force." But after I sold the company, a lot of ideas that were in the original Star Wars movies sort of got lost, but that's the way it is. When you give it up, you give it up. Now, I bring this up because Forbes just recently did a deep dive into Disney's finances. And to be specific here, Brian, they wanted to see if after nearly 12 years after Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm, whether or not they've gotten back that $4.5 billion. And more to the point, have they turned a profit at this point? And so Forbes compares the grosses of the Disney-produced Star Wars versus their production costs and promotional costs. I mean, they even go to the studios where these things are produced and get the receipts from there about how much to rent the sound stages, how many.
Oh, wow.
So, and here's the thing, they dig that they bring in forensic accountants and they dig down on all this financial data. And according to Forbes, the answer to this question is most definitely no. That, in fact, at this point, supposedly Disney is still $2.8 billion in the hole. And when it
Wait, and they put the merchandising in too?
yeah,
They factored into that?
and this again,
I find that hard to believe.
I do as well. But what's interesting is if you take that into account, that especially on the heels of what just happened with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fact that, for example, did you see where just in the past couple of weeks we learned that Lucasfilm is making all of those wonderful historical educational documentaries that they created to support the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, that those are now going to be available for viewing on YouTube with ads, of course.
On YouTube with ads?
So,
but not on Disney Plus.
No. Okay. You also have folks like Dave Filoni, who just recently did an interview and got asked about, would you ever consider an R-rated Star Wars? And
really?
Filoni, I mean, what's interesting about Dave is he said, well, that might be an idea worth exploring, because face it, there is an audience out there for things like Game of Thrones and its follow-up House of the Dragon. And I'm going to put it out there that Andor probably proves that, in fact, there is an audience out there for Star Wars for adults. I mean, that had such good writing. And really dealt, I mean, again, not an Ewok in sight. Also, and forgive me for bringing this up, but again, you have to remember, in the same window of time that Dial of Destiny spun in and wound up costing Disney, what, $130 million? In the same window of time, we saw the Galactic Star Cruiser close its doors.
And they're factoring things like that too?
Yeah. Well, remember, I mean, that...
All right.
And it's worth noting that on the heels of that underperforming, Disney Adventure World, the park that's now known as Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris, they canceled their plans for yet another Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So, before I forget though, did you see that thing that bubbled up on social media just in the past week over at Universal Studios Florida in the queue for Men in Black? Have you ever done the Men in Black in Florida? Yeah,
I have done the ride, and I'm familiar with it.
Okay, so you know how you walk through the field offices of... Right. And there are bulletin boards and that sort of thing up.
Oh, no.
All right, so there's a little index card up. For sale, one slightly used Galactic Star Cruiser. God. But again, I mean, look.
Wait, so Paris is not going to have a Galaxy's Edge now?
No, it fell off the table.
Well, see, then they should go back to and do the original.
Well, but that this is actually the conversation that's happening. That
Okay.
That it's the effect of...
Because I agree, there shouldn't be any more Galaxy Edges. Mm-hmm. There should be. You make it a destination, and you'll get a lot of people going to wherever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel to this day that if they had built Tatooine, it would be an entirely different conversation. But anyway.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, getting back to Star Wars for Adults, which brings us now to The Acolyte. And when we get back from this break, Brian is going to share his thoughts on this limited series over at Disney+. But first, this... And we're back. Before we get started on talking about The Acolyte, which makes me think of other Lucasfilm produced limited series for Disney+, which makes me think of Willow, which makes me think of Warwick Davis, and I'm embarrassed to say this, folks. We lost Samantha Davis, Warwick Davis's bride of 33 years. We lost her back in March, and this is oversight on my part, not Brian's. We should have acknowledged her passing long ago. So our condolences to the Davis family and Samantha's friends and family. And while we're acknowledging things that I failed to mention on this podcast, gaming fans keep nudging me, Brian, about Star Wars Outlaws, which will be launching on the PS5, the Xbox Series, and PC for Windows in August of this year. In fact, August 30th to be exact. And
we already have it on order.
Yeah, now this is coming from Massive Entertainment, right? And okay. So did you get to see the 10-minute long trailer that...
Yes, I did, and I can't wait for Devin to play it so I can watch it.
So you're as bad as I am.
But you don't have anybody that can play it for you.
I know. I have to.
I'll loan Devin out there. I'll send him out there, and he'll play it for you.
All right. Well, or is it Twitch where you get to watch somebody as they game? Maybe you could set up a Twitch channel so I could watch him.
That would be fun.
Okay, let's do that. But
if there's puzzles, sometimes he lets me. Okay, Dad, you can do this one.
Well, there we go. All right, but this is an open world game, and it's the story takes place between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And supposedly we get to see Jabba, and Quora, the Emily Clark character from Solo, a Star
Oh,
Wars story. She supposedly
okay.
so.
So what, like her and Jabba are in cahoots or something?
I don't know.
She's in charge of the Pikes, right?
I think that's where things left off with that
Okay.
movie. So I don't know. We will find out. But anyway, okay. So the Acolyte now, new limited series. We are 4 episodes in at this point. Is that correct? So
Yes.
basically halfway.
Yes.
Talk to me. What do you think of this series?
Well, first of all, I'm digging it because it's something different. And the lead actor, Lee, oh, I can't pronounce his last name, but he's amazing. Lee Jong Jai, I think is his name.
Okay.
And I've heard that he does not speak English very well. So all his dialogue is phonetical. And not only that, but it's so much emotion. So, well, he's amazing what he's doing with the character. It's also cool to see Daphne Keene, who, of course, we know as Baby Wolverine. And she's pretty good, even though she doesn't have a big part right now. And the lead actress is everything's good about it. The acting is phenomenal. I was basically upset and surprised that was it Carrie Moss? Is that
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah.
That she got she got out the first episode because I was hoping she'd be a part of it. But the third episode was phenomenal. What they did with it was, and I know the what Drew got out of the director and stuff,
Yeah.
but I didn't even go there.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, I mean, I at one time dated a witch, so I know what a coven's like. And it's not so much they're a bunch of same-sex people, they're just a bunch of women who get together to form a powerful unit. And that's what I saw when I saw that. But I think they were showing it in the wrong format. After seeing Rebel Moon, and how that was shown in 2 3 hour movies, I think they should show these films. Okay, it used to be, let's watch a thing every week and we'll talk about it at the water cooler. There are no more water coolers. There's no more talking about it. I mean, yes, the young people talk about it online, but what they do is there's all this garbage, trolls putting up their crap on YouTube, and it hurts because you're seeing it all out of context. Even though you're seeing it in order, you should see it in one sitting. And remember when Lawrence of Arabia came out, they had an intermission. If a movie's going to be 3 hours long, we need a friggin' intermission, especially for us 60 plus people. Because now I'm gonna go see Horizon, the Kevin Costner film, and I don't know, I might have to bring an adult baby wipe or something. But still, it's like I wouldn't mind seeing it in one context, especially last episode, because they cut it off at the wrong part. I mean, Darth Teeth or whatever you want to call him, he's just, we needed a little bit more, maybe a fight or something. But I think it's terrific. Oh, did you notice in the third episode there were no wipes or fades or circles or anything like that?
Wow,
It was
that's
told,
been
yeah.
that's been part of the Star Wars visual language
And
forever.
there's
Wow.
nothing. Both Devin and I are sitting there going, there's no wipes. There's no circles. There's no fades. There's nothing. So maybe they did it because they wanted to take it away from, because it was a flashback. So, but I think I have no problems with any Star Wars films that have been done because they have all been done for connecting to the originals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they even say we went back to the original and stuff like that. But I can't wait to see the rest of it, but I don't think I should have to wait every week.
Well, I mean, the irony is, of course, that once it's complete and once it's sitting at Disney Plus, I mean, you can do exactly
Right.
what you want. You can binge it in one throw, and it then, I think, as you say in your notes here, it would become one 3 hour long Star Wars story. And
Yeah, but could you imagine me waiting? It's like you waiting not to open the books to the making ofs.
yeah, I know. I'm weak. What can I tell you? But on the other hand, I mean, again, enjoying this. Also looking forward to Andor season 2, which is coming in 2025. And by the way, Diego Luna was out there talking up this series, and he just wanted to say that for those who love Rogue One, and I am one of those people, this season coming up is going to be very special, and it's going to be fascinating to go straight into Rogue One after watching the season, because you're then going to be able to see Rogue One from a different perspective. So he promises the audience
Oh,
that. So
oh, that's cool.
yeah, I mean, I again, I'm intrigued by that. But okay, so we are coming to our close here, folks. But before we go, wanted to share. Well, again, Brian was talking about water cooler moments, and if you want something cool to share, I came across this tonight while I was researching this episode of Looking at Lucasfilm. And all right, Brian, um, again, think about it. That George shoots A New Hope, and
Right.
for a time, he's now, wow, I need a voice for Darth Vader. And you've heard the stories. I mean, that there was
Yes.
some discussion of Orson Welles and other folks, but eventually they settle on James Earl Jones. Well, I've just recently come across information about that session where they brought James Earl Jones in to record Darth Vader's dialogue. First of all, care to guess how much he was compensated for this performance?
Well, if they were just going to do recording, then it would have been on a hourly basis, and I don't know how much they are charged, at least back then. But it's not a lot of money. I mean, that's the whole thing with Robin Williams. He did Aladdin for very little money, and then of course,
Yeah, I
but
want to
so I imagine,
say.
I don't know, it's got to be between 5,000 and 10,000 maybe.
Oh, jeez. Wow, that's scary. You nailed it. It
What?
actually was seventy
Oh,
five hundred
wow. Yeah.
dollars. Wow.
But
Okay,
see,
you're buying my lottery.
that
You're
was
buying my lottery tickets from
that
now on.
wasn't
Okay, so
that
yeah.
wasn't a bad amount back
Hmm.
then for ADR,
Okay, okay,
because
but
they usually come in and sometimes they would even do ADR on the set. That happened to us a lot. But he would come in, he'd do about maybe
mhm.
3 or 4 hours, and that's not bad. Maybe he did a couple
Well,
days, but
now that's interesting. You say that 3 to 4 hours. He actually recorded all of Darth Vader's dialogue for the original Star Wars in 2.5 hours. One 2.5 hour long session.
oh,
Uh,
okay.
and interesting thing, Jones was perfectly happy to get the check and for 2.5 hours. But again, it was the notion of when
I know.
he sat there. But again, he's looking up at the screen at the clips, and he's like, I'm doing dialogue for a guy dressed in black with a mask over his head. It's like. This isn't acting. This is special. He literally described it. I did special effects today. All right, and so thank you for the check. And so the movie explodes.
100%, because if it
Yeah.
wasn't for his voice,
Yep.
you wouldn't have that menace, that take her away. I mean, oh my God. I mean, when you saw that, chills went up your spine. It was, yeah. So it was number one best thing they could have done.
Interesting thing though, his name is not in the credits of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. The first time he ever gets
Really?
listed in a Star Wars film is Return of the Jedi.
But they always talked about it, right? We knew it was James Earl Jones.
Well, but remember, that first summer, that was one of those things that came out a couple of weeks in. You
Right.
know, it wasn't necessarily something that they shared immediately.
No.
And the other thing is, I gotta wonder about the conversation where finally, you think about it, in Return of the Jedi, we finally get to see Darth Vader's face.
Right.
And they did. Luke unscrews the mask, and it's. I'm blanking the name of the gentleman who's
Right.
not David Prowse, who does the vocal performance and is the face and is all made up. But wouldn't it have been cool at that moment if it were James Earl Jones? Unscrew the mask. And,
Then he wouldn't have been the father.
All right, that's an interesting
You're not
point.
the father.
Okay. What show is that again? You are not the father.
That's the
Maury Povich. There
Maury
we go.
Povich, right.
Boy,
But see, that's the thing. I think I heard that they came up with the "I'm Your Father" in post. And that it wasn't written in there. Of course, Mark says, he didn't, when he was doing it, was your father or Obi-Wan killed your father. And that's what he reacted to. But I don't know. I think it was like when we saw the first one, we were promised something like, who is Darth Vader, and who did he, and what happened to Luke's father, and also what are the Clone Wars? And that's another thing. Would the clones themselves call it the Clone Wars?
Okay, that's an interesting point. But it's so funny you bring up the idea that they found that in post, because there's that famous story about Avengers Endgame where they have that line.
Right.
With Thanos, I am inevitable, and the guy who's at the Moviola or the Avid stops it and turns to the Russo brothers and says, "And I am Iron Man," and they're like, "Oh my God, yes, we have to do that," and call Robert, we need to get him back in the costume. Right?
Okay,
So,
close up.
yeah, there we go. But all right. So anyway, that's enough from us two blithering geeks for this evening. So, Brian, if people want even more of your wonderful pop culture and history-related anecdotes, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, and I am under BT Gaughan, Gaughan, and I've been, every time I go to Disneyland, I write a little story about what I've been doing and stuff. And the next little story I'm putting up is about a mission I was put on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I had to take a picture.
All right. Now
with a van.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I love this story.
Yeah. And wait till you and the pictures that come with it. I believed that what's the brother's name? Bailey?
Let's see. Yes, Barley.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was sitting there and I told Barley what I was gonna do, and he was very like thumbs up and stuff like that. So he took the picture, and I said to him, this was the last film that I saw before lockdown, and it got me through it. And Barley hugged me. And the woman was taking, the Pixar person or the Disney person was taking pictures. And I send the picture to my wife, and she says, "That's the happiest I've ever seen you." But
okay.
I know why kids get in. It was real to me. He really hugged me, and I felt it. And I'm going, this is great. So even as adults, we can get sucked up into
totally.
this. But I should be putting that up in the next couple of days or so.
Can't wait to see that. And more to the point, that you just sort of underlined, circled, and indented the Daisy Ridley Ray story we told at the top of the show. So, all right, now.
And also I have a story that I'm going to be talking about blue milk. So
okay.
that should be there
there
too.
we go. All right. Now, as for myself, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that we have some other podcasts here we'd like you to check out. We, of course, have Disney Dish, which I do with Len Testa. I also have Fine Tuning that I do it through Taylor, who has the wonderful Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast.
Oh my God. It's one of the best. They are terrific at interviewing these old time directors that did these incredible movies. And the way they talk to them, it's like watching Cavett, talking to these people. They do an excellent job of interview, and especially because these are all the movies that I grew up on. So it's been terrific. So you got to listen to it for their director interviews too.
Well, no. It's interesting you mentioned Dick Cavett. I just saw a wonderful interview he did. And again, it just tells you the 70s were a different time. He did a full
Yep.
hour with Neil Simon, and it was just him talking about
Oh,
writing.
I got to
it was
watch
great.
that one.
All right. So anyway, but also credit where credit is due. Drew does the Light the Views podcast with Charles Hood. So Charles is an equal partner in that show. Okay. We also just recorded a brand new episode of the Epic Universal podcast with
Great
Eric
podcast.
Hersey, who edits and produces a lot of the shows here. I also did a brand new I Want That Too with Lauren Hersey.
Another great podcast.
Where we just brought on Noah Valladolid, who has an amazing Oswald collection, and more to the point, has some amazing stories about how he collected these pieces. And by the way, Noah works with Shelley Valladolid on the brand new show we have here at the Jim Mill Media Podcast Network that is Manufacturing the Magic. It is a theme park history show that is being produced by Pink Monorail. And, of course, I have to mention our first ever video series, Disney Unpacked. This past month, we have been talking about Mater's Junkyard Jamboree. In next month, in July, I'll be the 10th and final episode of season 1 of the show. We are talking about how Paradise Pier got changed into Pixar Pier.
Oh, cool.
So, all right. So, I guess that's it for the plugs. All right, folks. I do have one final request as we head out the door here. If you could do Mr. Gaughan and I a favor, if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review Looking at Lucasfilm, that would help get us extra eyes and or ears and eyeballs. And I guess for now that's going to do it. So, Brian.
This is the way.
This is the way. All right, we're going to continue on with the Acolyte, and in 2 weeks' time, we'll be talking about those episodes and whatever else is going on in the world of Lucasfilm. But till then, on behalf of Mr. Gaughan, thanks for listening, and we will be back soon.